Okay, welcome back to Beyond the Ceremony. I am your host, Laura Crockett. I am a celebrant and also mentor at the Academy of Modern Celebrancy. And I'm joined today, we need to roll out the red carpet because I'm joined by our head of learning, Penny. Hello, Penny.
Hi everybody, it's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
Penny's basically the one that makes everything happen at AMC. Like, you know, if we need anything to work, we ring Penny. That's the best way to do it.
I have a magic wand that makes everything happen.
Absolutely. So Penny, just introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you and you as a celebrant as well, of course, as your work at AMC.
So some of you will know me as Penny, some people call me Penelope. I answer to both and many other things in between as well. So if you can't tell by my accent, I'm based up in sunny Yorkshire in England, the UK. I've been a celebrant for a long time. So I was a celebrant before people really knew what a celebrant was. And when I first started out, there was no community, there was no sort of group of us gathered together. You were literally a one-man band out there on your own. So I've been doing ceremonies for what feels like an eternity now. It's like hard to remember my life before being a celebrant. But I do all different types of ceremonies. So yes, I do weddings and I do funerals, but there's also everything else in between. So for me, any occasion that a family or a couple or an individual want to mark that rite of passage with a celebration or a ceremony of some kind is exactly what I do. And I absolutely love it. It is the best job in the world.
Oh, that's so good. And actually, of course, there's so many things that I could talk to you about all the different ceremonies that you do. But today we are actually going to focus on quite a basic question for us because we've been doing it for a while. But actually, what is a wedding celebrant? That's what we're going to focus on today. And you, of course, Penny, have a lot of experience in this because can you tell us a little bit about what you used to do before you became a celebrant and kind of what made you make that decision to, you know, change?
Yeah, so before I became a celebrant, amongst many things, I was a principal officer, so otherwise known as a registrar.
Wow.
So yes, I came from the dark side and I joined the light, whichever way around you want to put it. So yeah, I spent over a decade as a registrar, registering births, deaths and marriages in the legal way. Completely different life altogether. Feels like a whole lifetime ago, really, when I was a registrar, wearing the suit, the grey suit, the blouse, the jacket, and all the rest of it, and working that 9-to-5 corporate lifestyle. It was a brilliant job, and I absolutely loved it. It was everything. You know, I never had that Sunday thing of, I've got work tomorrow. You know, it was really I loved being a registrar. I loved meeting people. I loved being part of history, you know, and I still reflect on that a little bit. Like, my name and my signature is on those pages of those registers forever, you know, and I was always amazed when I used to open old registers and, you know, going back to like, you know, 1870 something, and there was somebody's name in that moment of time on the page. And now that will be my name, and somebody in hundreds of years from now will be looking and seeing that. So I feel that sort of ink is etched on my heart forever. And if anyone's ever used registration ink, you will know that if it touches anything, you close your hands or anything, it stays for months.
Oh, that's it. It's never coming off.
That's never it. So I feel that part of my registration time will always stay with me, and I'll really treasure it. But the reality was very different to what I do now.
Of course.
So although I come to Celebrancy with all that ceremony experience and all that understanding of the legals in the background, it's very different being a celebrant.
Yeah. So can you talk to me about some of those differences? So what are some of the key differences between a registrar and a celebrant? I guess in this case, we're focusing mainly on weddings.
Yeah, okay. So in terms of weddings, you know, registrars conduct legal marriage registrations, the legal marriage contract. That's what they do. That's what they're responsible for. So those registration ceremonies, for want of a better word, have legal wording. They have strict content restrictions. They have limited options because they're there to fulfill a legal requirement.
Yeah.
You know, that's the basis of what a registrar does. Whereas a celebrant, you know, creates, writes, and conducts and delivers personal, bespoke, tailored to the couple wedding ceremonies. And I think that's where people get mixed up between what is a marriage and what is a wedding.
Absolutely.
And they're two really different things. And I often say to people, You know, the marriage is the legal requirement. It's the bit of paper, the stamp in the office.
Yeah.
The wedding is the event and the occasion. It's everything else. You know, you wear a wedding dress, you eat wedding cake, you send out wedding invitations, you're driving a wedding car, you book a wedding venue. None of that says marriage anyway, because it's not.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think once people can break down the difference between the legal registration and the wedding as two separate entities, you know, and that is the main difference between a registrar and a celebrant, is we do two different things.
Yeah.
You know, we're there to fulfill two different purposes. And being a celebrant means that we're not restricted on what we can do. You know, location, time of day. You want to get married at 10 p.m, then go for it.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
if you want to do it in your own garden, then go for it. We've got that freedom to offer literally a restriction-free, no rules wedding.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
And that might be cultural, religious. It might be, I don't know, you might want to drink tequila. You might want ring-bearing alpacas. Like, whatever the couple want, it's up to them and a celebrant to do that, because we're not restricted by law and
absolutely.
meeting that legal requirement. I think that's the biggest difference is between the marriage registration and a wedding ceremony.
Yeah, absolutely. And what was it, when you were a registrar, what was it that made you decide that you were going to have a complete change of career and go, right, I'm going to go and be a celebrant now? Like, talk to me a little bit about that kind of journey from being a registrar to moving over to being a celebrant.
I think being a registrar, doing weddings especially, it's relentless cookie cutter ceremonies.
Yeah.
That's the best way I can put it. You know, on a given Saturday in the summer month of August, you know, a registrar can potentially be doing 8 to 10 ceremonies on a Saturday.
Wow.
And you literally, it's one after the other, after the other, after. And it's a template, it's an insert name here ceremony.
Yeah.
To the point where we would write a couple's name on a post-it and stick it on the page in the book.
Really?
And that's how we knew where we were.
Oh,
we used to write down the couple's name, the venue we were standing in, and if they were having a reader.
Wow.
And that was it. That went on a post-it note, and that post-it note was just duplicated across the 4 pages of that ceremony. And as we got in the car and drove to the next one, we'd take those post-it notes out and put the new post-it notes in and go to the next ceremony and do the same.
Wow.
It was literally an insert name here, on repeat, relentless, monotonous, the same old, same old.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I watched so many couples squeeze into this ill-fitting, awkward box so they could simply get it done.
Yeah.
And they just didn't fit. A lot of couples just don't fit. And there's nothing wrong with the registrar ceremony if it's right for you.
Yes.
And it's what you want to do.
Yeah.
But more often than not, I often looked at these couples and thought, there's a better way to do this.
Yeah.
This isn't who you are. It's not reflecting you as an individual, as a couple. You know, and I'd never met these couples until standing there on their wedding day in that interview pre-ceremony. Like,
I just can't imagine
no idea
that.
Who they were.
No, I can't imagine that feeling of being like, oh, nice to meet you. Let's go and do your wedding ceremony. Like, that to me is just so bizarre. Obviously, I've only ever been on this side of the fence. But yeah.
As a celebrant, it's like shocking that you would do that. Like, it's a total no-no that you wouldn't know who your couple were. So, but as a registrar, you're literally just going from one to the next, and you're presented with, you'd be sitting in her office and somebody would come in from the venue and say, here's today's bride. And you're like, oh, hello, nice to meet you. That would be it. You'd have a couple of minutes with them before the ceremony started. So for me, I just thought there's got to be a better way to do this. And how can I do what I absolutely love, but in a much more flexible way where I can actually give to these couples what it is that they're seeking.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, for me, especially as a registrar, it wasn't that I fell out of love for the job. I fell out of love for the way it was being done.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think because of that difference between a marriage and a wedding, there is no real scope for change. So it was like, right, let's do this. Let's make a crazy decision. Let's give my notice in. Let's leave a really cushy, nice, steady job. Let's step back from, you know, sick pay and holiday pay and a nice healthy pension and all the rest of it, and let's go crazy and go start my own business.
Wow. And
I think I remember one day sitting in the office, and it was like a tiny little cupboard downstairs on the ground floor where registrations used to take place, and the window was high up on the wall in this Georgian building, and it was frosted, so I couldn't even see out and see outside. You know, and it was like, am I going to sit here for the next 20, 30 years waiting for a promotion?
Yeah.
Because it's dead man shoes. Once you get to the top, everyone's got to retire or die, and everyone moves up one.
Of course.
And I just thought, I can't wait that long. There's got to be something else.
Yeah.
So that was really the incentive to train and find. And even then, really, if I'm honest, celebrancy wasn't maybe the direction I was going in. It was just, I love this. So what else can there? What else is there out there? What can I do? And I knew if I didn't take that first step, I would never open the doors to those opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just took a massive risk.
And when was this?
Never looked back.
When was it because it was quite
early 2000s.
Wow. So you were one of
like a lifetime ago now.
Yeah, you were one of like the OG celebrants. Like when you think about it, it's like actually that was in a time like I trained in 2019, so we were still a little bit like, oh, no one's really, fully understanding the difference. But actually there was still that awareness. People knew what a celebrant was. Like if I spoke to people, they were like, oh, so are you like a non-legal registrar? And that was what people used to say, but they had heard of them. Whereas when you started, it was literally like such a brand new concept. And was it a big thing in like Australia at the time? Because I know they were like, they had celebrants a lot, before us, didn't they?
Yeah, and I think fortunately for me is I was being immersed in the wedding world. Even as a registrar, you're kind of in tune with the wedding world. You're meeting lots of suppliers.
Yeah.
So I was aware that celebrants were a thing, but I didn't realise how they lacked here in the UK and in England. So I started to sort of do that investigation and look to Australia as a really great example. And then I realised they were doing it in so many other countries as well. We were so far behind the curve here in England.
As always.
As always, yeah. And I suddenly started looking at the different types of celebrant, because there's so many different types of celebrant as well. And where they are in Europe or in the States and in Australia, and they all serve these different roles, and some of them have the legal capacity and some of them don't. So it was really sort of like, wow, this is a huge industry that is yet really not familiar here in England. So, and I looked into humanists and I looked into independence and all the different variations, and it was just the freedom that drew me to independent celebrancy. Yeah,
of course.
And I think, as a celebrant, you've got to truly believe and love what you are offering. And I think it's really important that, any celebrant out there, whether they're starting out or they're, knee deep in ceremonies, is being authentically themselves and finding ceremonies that literally light a fire in your belly. You want to be at these weddings and you want to be part of this couple's story.
And just having that joy and that excitement. And you touched on it very briefly there, that you looked into the different options of celebrants, so humanist celebrants versus independents. For anyone listening who isn't aware of the differences, can you talk to me a little bit about that? So the difference between humanist celebrants and independent celebrants?
Yeah, so humanist celebrants are a group or a community or a collective of celebrants who have a philosophy-based belief. And most couples who use a humanist will align or associate with that belief and with that philosophy. And for me, it's still restricted what I was able to offer. I do work with a lot of clients who want a nod to a culture or a belief or a religion of their own or of their families. And as a humanist, I couldn't do that. And I felt if I don't really align with being a humanist, I'm kind of not really being true to myself, and by that I'm not being true to my clients.
Yeah, absolutely.
And although it's a really proactive and growing market, the humanists, and yes, they can do the legal ceremonies in certain parts of the world that we can't, it just wasn't for me. I still thought I'm just now fitting myself in a box that I'm trying to free all these couples from.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I agree with you. That's exactly what I did when I trained as a celebrant. I looked into, becoming a humanist wedding celebrant or an independent wedding celebrant. And exactly like you've said, I didn't want to make it about me and my beliefs in that ceremony, even though a lot of the humanist faith or belief, however we could describe it, I actually do agree with a lot of their values. values. And I think a lot of their values about being a good person and being kind to other people and things like that, totally agree with. And I wouldn't necessarily say that I am religious myself, but at the same time, if I have a couple come to me who want to include some religion in their ceremony or some culture in there, like, you know, something that is important to them, who am I to say, oh, actually, no, because that's not my belief? And I completely agree with you that was what I wanted to do as well. I wanted to be able to offer that flexibility. And I think that's the thing when people look at celebrants, if they're maybe not clear, yes, humanist celebrants are still a non-religious ceremony, but humanism is a belief in itself. So it's kind of like looking at those different offerings and deciding which one aligns more with you and as a person of, you know, what kind of ceremonies you want to offer.
And I think there's so many celebrants out there, whether they're humanist or independent, you know, in different shapes, different sizes, different styles, different characters, different personalities. There really is a celebrant for everybody.
Yeah.
You know, and I think, you know, as the celebrant community grows and, you know, more people are, like, I'm finding now that I don't have to explain what a celebrant is quite as much as I used to when I first started. Most people go, oh, you're a celebrant, right? I know what that is. And it's like, wow, finally the public are on the same page as us.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, it's that joy of couples now are looking for the right celebrant for them.
Yes.
They're not just going to the first one they can find online or the first one that comes up on Google or the one that the venue recommend. I've certainly seen in my couples that they're starting to interview, for want of a better word, chat to different celebrants until they find that connection, you know. And part of my work with couples at the end when I touch base with them is, why do they pick me? And I'm always fascinated in the reasons why they've maybe looked at 5 celebrants and they've chosen to go with me. And it's never for the reasons you think it is.
Really?
And it's really, I would say this to anybody who's working as a celebrant, ask your couples at the end of your journey together, why did they choose you? It's a really nice way to reflect back on the journey that you've spent with them. And, you know, there is so many different celebrants doing a multitude of different ceremonies. You know, we think weddings, namings, funerals, but commitment, divorce, coming out, celebrations of life, memorials. You know, there's so many ceremonies that celebrants can officiate and write and create and support those families and individuals with. It's literally, I always say, you know, celebrants are ceremony superheroes. That's the best way to describe them.
I like that.
No matter what it is you're looking for, there will be a celebrant superhero that can give you that back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think exactly like you said, the market of celebrants is growing, but I think it is such a positive place to be because 1, everyone's all got that individual personality, but 2, exactly like you said, I will have calls with my couples now and I'll say, okay, so what made you choose a celebrant? And they'll say, oh, we went to 2 ceremonies last year with celebrants, or our friend's having a celebrant this summer and they were telling us about it. Like, more people are using celebrants now, which is spreading the word. And I think that's where being part of this industry at such an exciting time is so good, because we're growing all the time. And it's like, you look at photographers now, like, you know, there's so many photographers. If people say, oh, there's so many people qualifying as celebrants, like, you know, is there going to be too many people? It's like, well, no, look how many photographers there are, cake makers, florists, hairstylists, like, you know, there is space for everybody. And the more people who are becoming celebrants, the more we raise that awareness, and actually people can see their different choices and how things can be done so differently.
And I say that to people, you know, a lot of new celebrants drop into my inbox and say, hey, I'm just starting out, you know, I need some help and some support. And I always say to them, when they talk about, you know, too many celebrants, saturated markets, all these sort of conversations, I always say, do Costa not advertise they do coffee because Starbucks do?
Yeah, that's
like,
so
they're
true.
2 multi-million-pound companies that make coffee. And you don't see them not marketing themselves, not pushing forward. You know, you look at supermarkets, Tesco stop advertising because Sainsbury's are.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, when you look at big successful companies, Amazon, Amazon still advertise on TV. You know, in between Saturday night telly. You know, that's visibility. And when we talk about that industry growth and celebrants become, like you say, because I was at a wedding and I saw one, or my friend had one, or I saw it at a wedding fair. It's all where it's been visible and they've experienced it or seen it themselves, which is how we shop. You know, you look at anything you buy, you're influenced from somewhere. And it's visibility and that community growing. So when people say about, oh, there's so many celebrants, I always say, That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Because when I started, there wasn't any.
Yeah, and you had to do it all yourself.
You literally felt like this tiny little goldfish in this whacking great pond where nobody knew where you were.
Wow, honestly.
And you would just spend hours and days and months just saying, I'm a celebrant, this is what I do. Did you know you had a choice? And they're like, oh, but the registrar, oh, we're going to the church. Like, whereas now I stand at wedding fairs and people come up and go, oh my God, you're a celebrant.
Yeah.
Great, we've been dying to meet you, or our celebrant, and it's like that whole dynamic has shifted in such a positive way. And that comes from growth. That comes from being a bigger community of celebrants, and us all coming from that place of education and visibility and sharing that knowledge and sharing that with the general public. That you have a voice.
Yeah.
You are in full control of everything you do at your wedding.
Yeah.
What you eat, how you sit, where people sit, what the dress code is, what they're drinking, what music they listen to. Why wouldn't you take that control over your ceremony as well?
Yeah.
The most important part of the day.
Absolutely.
And when you say that to couples, they go, oh, I never thought of the ceremony part being like in my control. And it's like, absolutely it is. So that I think that growth and that increase in celebrants is only a positive thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, yourself and your background, you will know this better than anyone. Doing the legal part is actually pretty easy and quite straightforward, and only needs to be something that's super simple. So to anyone listening who's maybe thinking, yeah, I think celebrancy is for me, but how do I explain to, my couples and families about the legal side of things? Can you just kind of talk to us about that, about how simple and easy it can be?
A legal registration of a marriage, aside from giving notice, which most couples have to do anyway.
Yeah.
When you give notice of marriage, you are declaring your intention to marry the other person. It's a paperwork exercise. You take along your passport, your bank statements, that sort of thing. You prove who you are and you apply to say you're going to marry this other person on this said date and time. The actual registration part is really short. It's 14 legal words in a prescribed fashion. 14.
Wow.
And 2 signatures, not even in a register anymore, on a simple piece of white A4 paper.
Wow.
That makes you legally married in this country at this time. And it can take less than 10 minutes. And I often say to couples, have you ever bought a house? Because if you've ever bought a house, you will have at some point exchanged contracts.
Yep.
And you will have gone to your solicitors and signed on the dotted line. And you walk out, you've got no house, you've got no keys, you've got no paperwork. It's like, oh, that's that then. Yeah. That's that done.
Yeah.
And then about a week later, you get the keys. And you're like, yay, we've got a new house. Yeah, this is brilliant. And I just say to couples, that's the difference between a marriage and a wedding.
Yeah.
The marriage is the legal requirement, the signing the deeds, going to the solicitor's office, doing what you need to do legally.
Yeah. The
wedding is the event and the occasion and the screenshot of your house keys that you share on Instagram.
Yeah.
That's the event and the experience of it.
Absolutely.
And I think, legally registering your marriage can literally be just the two of you. And if you want to take somebody with you, friends, family, whatever, that's fine. But you can do it like the movies, and you can ask 2 people from the street, have you got 10 minutes? I'm just popping to the town hall, want to get married, need somebody to be our witnesses.
Will you come with me? I'd love that.
No. Yeah, we used to have it all the time. One of the register offices I worked at was across the road from a big Tesco superstore.
Oh, really?
And people used to use the Tesco car park to come to the register office. So what would happen is they'd come and say, oh, we need 2 witnesses, and it can't be somebody that works in the building. So you would say, hop back to Tesco's, and we'd get girls from the customer service desk who'd come over in their uniform. They'd quite often bring a box of chocolates or a bottle of bubbly with them.
So funny.
And it's 10 minutes in their lunch break, and they'd sit and be witnesses,
That's amazing.
And a lot of my couples don't. They keep that quite private.
Yeah. Same.
They go off and they just do the legals because it's just part of the legal process.
Yeah.
It's part of the paperwork. It's giving notice, getting a license, signing on the dotted line. Right. Now we can focus on the wedding.
Yeah.
The actual part that we're looking forward to, the bit that's unique to us and the bit that's bespoke. And it's very rare now that I speak to couples who say, actually, we just want to go to the registrars. Because I think couples are educating themselves now what do I need to do to marry? What's the difference between a registrar or a humanist, an independent? All the options that they've got. And they can still have church weddings. A lot of couples still want that rite of passage and have a religious ceremony in the church in their village, or where they were christened, or where their mum and dad was married. And it's all good, as long as it's what the couple wants and what's meaningful and right for them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so true. And I think that's the thing. The more people are seeing it and realising their options, exactly like you said then, I don't get those conversations anymore at open days or wedding fairs where I have to spend the first 10, 15 minutes explaining what we do. Occasionally to the older relatives, I might have to explain to them. They go, oh, what are you doing then? But, actually, a lot of people already know. And it's kind of a no-brainer when you see the flexibility, the freedom, that choice that you have. Actually, people already get that, and they know that they want to inject that personality. And I think exactly like you said, it's that experience. For me, I always tell my couples, look, your ceremony sets the vibe for the rest of your day. What vibe do you want it to have? Do you want it to have that formal vibe that doesn't really say you, or do you want it to be all about you from start to finish? And I think that is the thing. People are getting it more now, aren't they? And that's why I think it's such an exciting time to be a part of it, because a lot of that work's being done for you. Whereas when you first started, Penny, you were having to shout it from the rooftops and do all your own marketing as well.
It literally felt like I was dragging a set of stairs around, and I was getting on them and saying, hi, everybody, this is what I do. Knocking on wedding venue doors and going, oh, well, we use the registrars. It's like, yeah, that's great. But did you know you can, I used to just spend so much time. I mean, I did everything. I went to wedding fairs. I went to wedding venues. I went to some awful, boring business networking meetings.
Yeah. The ones that start at the crack of dawn as well.
Grey corporate suit, and it's like, oh, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
That's what I had to do to get myself out there. And in doing that, I actually grew as a person. My confidence grew, my ability to talk about what I did and what a celebrant offers, because I still use some of the stuff I learned then now.
Yeah, of course.
And I think, for celebrants that are starting out and they're just thinking, oh, could I be a good celebrant? Do I have this, I'm not a confident speaker, or I haven't got, just look back at all the other things you've done in your life. You will have an arsenal of skills in your skill toolbox that you can pull out. And it might be that you're good with processing and organizing files. It might be that you're public speaking. It might be that you're great at writing. I'm going to make the perfect celebrant. We all come with this huge baggage of what if I don't, what if I can't, I've never used tech before, I've never stood in a room full of 50 people, let alone 500 people. How am I going to do this? You know? And sometimes it's you go on and you learn along that journey, and things that you start out with. I look back at my branding when I started and the clients I thought I wanted to work with, and it was like, I couldn't be any further away from that now. And your business and your celebrant role, your character that you become as a celebrant changes along the way as well.
Of course. And what would you say if somebody, for example, last summer, they've been to a ceremony, it was celebrant led, they loved it, and they're thinking, I think that's what I would like to do. What do you like? Have you got any tips or advice if anyone's there thinking, okay, how do I go from that? And I will ask you your one piece of advice in a minute for anyone training, but I just mean, if you've sat and watched a celebrant in action, what are some of the traits and things that you think actually people should be able to do, and things that they should prepare before they look into doing it as a career?
I think what's really important is to do your research. Look at different types of training, look at different training providers, look and be realistic. A lot of people enter into celebrant training without being realistic. Do your research and find what works for you, because you can go into a million different forums and put the same question in, what's the best training, and you will get a million different answers all the time.
Of course, yeah.
Do your own research. Is an online training platform better for you, like we offer at the AMC? Do you need to physically go to a location and sit with somebody one-to-one for 3, 4, 5 days and do a residential? Is that how you learn? Because all of it is celebrant training. It's about finding training. As we say to our clients, find what's right for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Find the celebrant that's right for you. Find the training that's right for you. It is your journey to becoming a celebrant, and everybody's journey is going to look different. Some people book on a course, 6 months down the line, they're launching a celebrant business, they've got an amazing website, they've got a brilliant social media platform, and they're flying. Other people want to do a nice, slow, steady burn, and they want to get familiar with tech, and they want to get familiar with their celebrant training and their understanding, and then launch. It doesn't matter how you do it.
Yeah.
It's that you're doing it a way that you feel comfortable in, and a great training organization will support you in that way that suits you.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not a one size fits all box like it isn't for our clients. You know, it's about finding the training that's right for you and that's got support that you need in the places that you need it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it may be a little bit repetitive, but I do always finish with that one top tip. So I guess maybe not thinking about the training, but if there's something else that you think, what is your one piece of advice for anyone who's thinking about becoming a celebrant?
Going back to being celebrant superheroes.
Yeah.
Your biggest superpower is being yourself. Be authentic, be honest, be yourself, because that's the easiest person for anybody to be, is themselves.
Yeah, that's so true.
Because otherwise all you're doing is imitating somebody else, which is hard work to imitate somebody else long term. So whether you're starting out as a celebrant, you're already a celebrant, just be you. Everybody else is taken, as the famous saying goes.
Yeah,
just
so true
you.
though.
And don't be afraid to invest in yourself. And that might be CPD, it might be more training, it might be voice works, it might be, I don't know, makeover, haircut, new outfit, whatever that is. Investing in yourself will help your celebrant business grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, Penny, I could talk to you all day. Thank you so much. We'll have to have you back for another episode. And the CPD, that's definitely one that I want to talk about. So maybe we'll get you booked in for that. But thank you.
Absolutely.
You're
very welcome.
Amazing as always, and so inspiring. And like I say, I could just grill you all day long. So thanks for sharing about some of your journey so far.
Thanks for having me, Laura.
Fabulous. Thanks, Penny.